Dzień dobry. Przepraszamy za małe opóźnienie, ale jeszcze mamy grupy, które chcą wziąć udział w dialogu. Ja nazywam się Sylwia Katarzyna Mazur i w imieniu swoim oraz organizatorów chciałabym Państwa bardzo serdecznie powitać na Dialogu Obywatelskim. Dziękuję. Naszym gościem dzisiaj będzie szef Dyrekcji Generalnej Komisji Europejskiej do spraw polityki regionalnej oraz miejskiej, pan Marciem Lemaitrem. Szanowni Państwo, Dialogi Obywatelskie to inicjatywa Komisji Europejskiej, która ma na celu umożliwienie lokalnym społecznościom kontakt z najważniejszymi urzędnikami Komisji Europejskiej. Inicjatywa ta wystartowała w roku 2012 i jeszcze do niedawna w takich dialogach udział brali komisarze. Natomiast przewodniczący Juncker zmienił formułę i postanowił, że w takich dialogach będą także brali udział wysokiej rangi urzędnicy pracujący dla Komisji Europejskiej oraz szefowie przedstawicielstw w poszczególnych państwach Unii Europejskiej. O akceleracji działań świadczy fakt, że choć mamy dopiero środę, albo już środę, co dla niektórych, to jest już to trzeci dialog obywatelski, który w tym tygodniu odbywa się w Polsce. W poniedziałek w Toruniu mieszkańcy Torunia spotkali się z komisarzem do spraw zdrowia i zdrowej żywności, Litwinem Vytenisem Andriukaitisem. Wczoraj w Kielcach odbył się dialog obywatelski z szefem przedstawicielstwa Komisji Europejskiej w Polsce, doktorem Marciem Prawdą. I dzisiaj my właśnie gościmy u nas dyrektora Marca Lemaitra. Szanowni Państwo, jak sama nazwa wskazuje, dialogi są organizowane dla obywateli i tak naprawdę to Państwo są siłą napędową dzisiejszego wydarzenia. Natomiast my jako organizatorzy pozwoliliśmy sobie stworzyć pewne ramy po to, żeby ta dyskusja była w miarę uporządkowana. Dlatego, Szanowni Państwo, że mamy naprawdę ograniczony czas. Więc chciałabym opowiedzieć o czym jak dzisiejsza rozmowa będzie wyglądać. Zaczniemy od przyszłości Europy, przyszłości integracji europejskiej, którą będziemy omawiać na podstawie Białej Księgi. Jeśli ktoś z Państwa jeszcze nie zdążył sobie wziąć, to serdecznie zapraszamy. Tam na stolikach to są publikacje przygotowane specjalnie dla Państwa. Ten dokument jest kluczowy, jeśli chodzi o debatę na temat Unii Europejskiej i kolejnych lat. W drugiej części naszego dialogu skupimy się na polityce spójności po roku 2020. Natomiast zakończymy rozmową dotyczącą wsparcia Unii dla regionów słabiej rozwiniętych ze szczególnym uwzględnieniem naszego regionu i sytuacji Polski Wschodniej. Szanowni Państwo, tak jak powiedziałam, formuła jest bardzo otwarta, dlatego mogą Państwo zadawać w każdej chwili pytania. Ja będę oczywiście tutaj Państwa, będę w stronę publiczności się zwracać. Mam tylko jedną uwagę i jedną prośbę, a mianowicie, Szanowni Państwo, podejdzie ktoś do Państwa, kto przytrzyma mikrofon, dobrze? Także jeśli jest ręka podniesiona, to tutaj nasi pomocnicy podejdą z mikrofonem i bardzo proszę trzymać mikrofon w miarę blisko ust, tak żeby właśnie nasi tłumacze, którzy są dzisiaj z nami, mogli wyłapać to, o czym Państwo mówią. Jest wiele osób, które na dzisiejsze spotkanie nie mogło dotrzeć, dlatego dla tych osób przygotowaliśmy alternatywne formy zadawania pytań. Dlatego tutaj mam nadzieję, że uda się też przedstawić pytania, które zostały zadane online lub zostały wcześniej nagrane na filmikach i właśnie takie działania udało nam się podjąć z Punktem Informacji Europejskiej Europe Direct Rzeszów oraz Centrum Dokumentacji Europejskiej. Szanowni Państwo, wydarzenie jest transmitowane na żywo, więc jeśli z kolei Państwo wiedzą, że ktoś chciałby tutaj być, a nie może, to oczywiście na kanale na YouTube Komisji Europejskiej dialog jest transmitowany na żywo i tuż po zakończeniu wydarzenia, także na tym samym kanale, na kanale Komisji Europejskiej, będą Państwo mogli odtworzyć całe wydarzenie. Do wszystkich Państwa, którzy pragną się dzielić relacją online, czyli jeśli Państwo tweetują, zamieszczają posty na Facebooku, mamy przygotowanego hashtaga, dlatego bardzo proszę przy każdym tweetie, przy każdym poście, przy każdej wiadomości korzystać właśnie z tego tweeta. Dzięki temu wiadomość o tym, co dzieje się w Rzeszowie, wiadomość o naszym dialogu obiegnie media społecznościowe. Wszyscy ci z Państwa, którzy korzystają z tłumaczenia symultanicznego, tłumaczenie na język polski, bo język polski odbywa się na kanale 1, na język angielski na kanale 2. For Polish 1, for English 2. Jedna jeszcze prośba od organizatorów, bardzo gorąca, aby pamiętać o tym, aby oddać zestawy do tłumaczenia symultanicznego. Czyli jeśli Państwo korzystają z nich, to bardzo proszę w tym miejscu, z którego Państwo go pożyczyli, oddać. Tam już czekają na nas właśnie nasi panowie od pomocy technicznej, więc bardzo nam zależy, żeby Państwo tego sprzętu nie wynosili, tylko żeby on wrócił do właściwych osób. Szanowni Państwo, nie przedłużając, bo tak jak mówię, pytań jest wiele, dzieje się dużo, pozwolą Państwo, że zaproszę na scenę naszego gościa, szefa Dyrekcji Generalnej do spraw Komisji Europejskiej do spraw polityki regionalnej i miejskiej, pana Marca Lemaitra. Pozwolą Państwo, że przybliżę sylwetkę naszego gościa. Pan Marc Lemaitre jest Luksemburczykiem z pochodzenia i z ponad 20-letnim doświadczeniem, jeśli chodzi o kwestie unijne. Wcześniej pracował w dyplomacji Luksemburga, potem zaczął pracować w Komisji Europejskiej. Jest też wątek polski w jego karierze i to jest taki smaczek, dlatego że nasz dzisiejszy gość był także szefem biura Danuty Hübner, która była pierwszą polską komisarz, de facto była komisarz do spraw polityki regionalnej i później kontynuował pełnienie tych obowiązków u jej następcy Pawła Sameckiego. Co jest jednak kluczowe z naszej perspektywy i z perspektywy naszych tematów dzisiaj, to fakt, że Marc Lemaitre zarządzał biurem komisarza do spraw budżetu Janusza Lewandowskiego. I to właśnie w tym okresie, kiedy ustanawiano ramy finansowe na lata 2014-2020. Po raz pierwszy w historii te właśnie 7-letnie ramy finansowe, w którymi funkcjonuje Unia Europejska, były niższe, czyli budżet Unii Europejskiej był o ponad 40 miliardów euro niższy, natomiast okazało się, że Polska była głównym beneficjariuszem i właściwie dalej jest, więc podejrzewam, że jest to także zasługa naszego dzisiejszego gościa. Obecnie pan Marc Lemaitre pełni funkcję szefa Dyrekcji Generalnej do spraw polityki regionalnej i miejskiej i jest to jedna z najpotężniejszych dyrekcji, jeśli chodzi o Komisję Europejską. Nasz dzisiejszy gość zarządza ponad 700 osobami, a budżet jego dyrekcji to 260 miliardów euro. Szanowni Państwo, nie przedłużając, przywitajmy gromkimi brawami naszego dzisiejszego gościa.
Dzień dobry. If you don't mind, I will take off my jacket because this is a very cozy place. And thank you very much for the warm welcome of yours. And these are not, just empty formulas I'm using. Indeed, I'm extremely delighted and excited to be with you today and to have this privilege, I'm sure, of exchanging with you, because indeed it is about a dialogue. It is not about a monologue. It is not about me answering questions. Of course, you can ask questions, but I would be very happy if you also express opinions, what you think. And I'll say in a minute about what exactly. No, I'm delighted also because indeed I have a particular sensitivity for Poland, and I think it doesn't go back to those times which have been mentioned more recently over the past 10 years, having worked very closely with various European commissioners of Polish nationality. It goes back further. It goes back to 1989, which was, I think, my year of political awakening, when such fundamental changes, so positive on the European continent, especially so positive as compared to China, which happened exactly at the same time. You remember Tiananmen, April 1989. Well, you had April 1989 in Poland with the Round Table, and you had April 1989 elsewhere in the world, and Poland was an incredible trailblazer. And I, from then on, followed Poland with the greatest interest, and I was amazed at the incredible pace at which Poland, in all matters, developed, including in its relations with the European Union while it was still not a member of the European Union, and then what it did afterwards since it formally acceded now 13 years ago. So, you know, I am a bit sentimental when I speak about Poland, and my only regret, and it's a personal shame for me, is that indeed I cannot say much more than Dzień dobry still now. so I will have to continue in English, unfortunately. Now, this is a dialogue. Where does this come from, and why have we recently decided as European Commission that we need to intensify this dialogue? Well, it is very frankly because it is undeniable that the European Union is not feeling well. Together, we sense a certain malaise, we sense certain differences of view, a certain doubt about how we should move forward, how we should shape the future, what priorities we should be setting. This has been, I think, this sensation has been obviously reinforced very significantly by the decision of the United Kingdom to leave the European Union. This was, I think, the ultimate wake-up call to us that, and when I say to us, it's to Europe and it's to all citizens of Europe that we need to reflect, and we need to try collectively to find a common purpose, a commonly shared goal for the future. And so this is why, you know, you should not feel constrained by the very Cartesian, in fact, very French way of organizing things today. To me, it is mostly about the future of Europe. I have no problem, I don't mind at all if, of course, you dwell on cohesion policy, European funds, the European budget, etc. But as we all know, the EU is about much more than money. It is not only about money. So I will be very happy if we speak about other things, the way the European Union is working, you know, the way member states are interacting, the institutions are working. Is it democratic? Is it not democratic? The hot potatoes of the day, what makes what creates today some tensions between governments, I would say, you know, much more governments than citizens, I believe. You know, how do we handle the migration crisis? What kind of asylum policy do we want for the future? What should we do on free movement of people? What indeed should we do when it comes to instruments of redistribution, instruments of solidarity between member states? What about the values we are sharing, fundamental values? You know, the ongoing dialogue, I would hope, between the Commission and the Polish government on the question of the rule of law. All these things, you know, I think should be topics available for you today and many more. So don't hesitate at all. And again, you know, it doesn't have to be just questions. It can really be about your own opinions, your own beliefs, your own hopes for Europe and Poland in the future, or your own objections to things as they stand today, etc., etc. And I don't want to, you know, say much more in terms of introduction. I think the floor is as much yours as mine.
Thank you. Więc zapytam, czy ktoś z Państwa ma już teraz pytanie do naszego gościa? Jeśli nie, to ja pozwolę sobie zadać pierwsze pytanie i ono właśnie będzie odnosić się do Białej Księgi, o której już Państwu wcześniej wspominałam. Mianowicie ta publikacja została zaprezentowana podczas obchodów 60. rocznicy podpisania traktatów rzymskich w Rzymie oczywiście i zawiera 5 scenariuszy potencjalnego rozwoju dla Unii Europejskiej. Jeden z tych scenariuszy, scenariusz numer 3, jest nazywany potocznie scenariuszem Europy wielu prędkości. I to jest ten scenariusz, który w Polsce budzi najwięcej obaw. Więc ja mam pytanie do naszego gościa, aby wytłumaczył najbardziej euroentuzjastycznemu społeczeństwu w Europie, jakie wynikają zagrożenia z tego scenariusza numer 3, a może wręcz przeciwnie, może nie mamy się czego obawiać.
This is a very important topic, and thanks very much for indeed drawing attention to the structure of this document, which the Commission has brought out very recently to underpin the public debate and to stimulate the public debate on the future of the EU, because it is a very unusual document for the Commission. Usually the Commission, according to the treaties which found the European Union and which define the roles of its institutions, etc., the European Commission is there to make proposals to the legislative bodies, the Council on the one hand, which represents the member states' governments, and the European Parliament on the other hand, composed of directly elected members of the European Parliament. So normally, you know, we make a suggestion. Here, and I really invite those of you who haven't seen that document yet to have a look at it, because it is not at all technocratic, you know, it is plain language. We have chosen to stimulate the debate by putting forward 5 schematic, I would say, scenarios of how the dynamics of the EU could develop in the future. And among those 5 scenarios, there is also one which basically says we do much less together in the future. We roll back the level of integration, and we go back to just a free trade area, basically, to just the internal market. So this is to show you that as this obviously is not, you know, the preferred scenario of the European Commission, still we were keen on presenting a palette of broad, very broad options for the future. And one of them is this. Some call it multi-speed Europe. Others call it variable geometry or concentric circles. You have found there have been a lot of terms already used to basically describe the same thing, and it is that we are a union now of 28 member states, tomorrow unfortunately of 27 member states, where some member states in certain areas, subgroups of member states, decide to go further. I would want to emphasize that what the reality of today is. And the reality of today is that we have certain areas where this exists today. In Poland, there is no euro today. You have the euro in 19 member states, 19 of the 27 member states. This is multi-speed Europe. Schengen is even more original in a way, because this area of free movement of people, how glad I am every time, you know, I travel within this very vast Schengen area, be it to Poland as today, be it to Estonia as I was a few weeks ago, or to other places, not to have even to show your identity card. I mean, this is, I find it still amazing. Well, not all member states are in the Schengen area. The UK has never been in the Schengen area. When you go to the UK, you are subject, and it's not only for the past year or two, you are subject to strict immigration control, in fact. Same for Ireland, because Ireland belongs to the same passport area as the UK. Conversely, same for Cyprus. If you go to Cyprus, you do have passport control. Conversely, you have some states associated with the European Union, which are part of Schengen. Norway is part of Schengen. Switzerland now is part of Schengen. So this is also multi-speed Europe. You have in the treaty a provision which allows for so-called reinforced cooperation. And this allows, under certain very strict conditions, when all the member states don't manage, according to the rules, to come to an agreement on certain proposals of the Commission, well, some member states might say, yes, but we want to go ahead on the basis of this proposal of the Commission. And you need a minimum of 9 member states to be able to do that. For those 9 member states to be able to go ahead. And these usually are very specific pieces of integration or legislation, if you want. The latest example of that is the so-called European Public Prosecutor's Office. It is not for going after any kind of crime, you know. It is only to protect the financial interests of the EU budget. So to be able to, at a European level, go after fraud to the EU budget, not anything else. So it is very restricted. Well, not all member states were willing to participate in that. And do you know whether Poland participates or doesn't participate in that? It doesn't participate in that, which is a bit striking, no? Given how much money flows to Poland from the EU budget. Well, this is not something, I guess, which has raised a lot of emotions, in fact, in any member state. So this is normalcy, and it's a form of multi-speed Europe. Now, of course, I can understand that some people are worried, including and especially in Poland, when one imagines further developments of this asymmetric type. But there I would say that it is difficult to imagine how one could legitimately stop others from deciding to work together if you don't want to participate. It's difficult, no? To say, yeah, well, I don't like this, and I refuse for others to do this. Let's take the euro area, because I know this is the main worry in certain quarters in Poland. And this is indeed the area where more integration is required. And there, again, you know, I'm not stating a personal opinion. This is a clear position of the Commission that for the euro area to be sustainable, and in fact we find in Poland many voices saying the euro will interest us when the eurozone has sorted out its problems, meaning there is a recognition also in Poland that in fact integration at the level of the eurozone has to go further for the eurozone to be resilient, solid, sustainable in the long term. That new instruments need to be added so that the eurozone can function well in the long term. So what legitimacy would there be for a member state which is not part of the eurozone to tell the members of the eurozone that they are not allowed to cooperate in a certain way so that the eurozone functions better? It's, I would say, a delicate position to hold. So these are the introductory comments I would be making on this question, and it's a very pertinent one. Again, I invite you to also look at that document, because today, in fact, the Commission has adopted one more so-called reflection paper, which flows from this white paper on the future of the EU overall. There will be 5 reflection papers altogether. This is now the 3rd coming out, and it is about reinforcing the Eurozone. And so today, yes, the Commission has brought out a document which suggests certain developments which are required so that the Eurozone would be more resilient. And one of them, because I also know this is a very specific fear of some in Poland. Yes, one of them has a dimension of public spending. What is stated in that document is that the Eurozone needs a kind of counter-cyclical instrument so that it can help some members of the Eurozone who would be hit by an asymmetric crisis, who would see, for instance, their unemployment rate rise very dramatically over a short period of time. That instrument would help member states either to face the additional cost of the unemployment benefits it would hand out, or to sustain public investment and to support the level of public investment. So there, you know, of course, yes, there are potential implications for what one does with 27 member states if certain things need to be pooled together at the level of a subgroup of member states, and in this particular case of the Eurozone in particular.
Thank you. Szanowni Państwo, znajdujemy się w murach Wyższej Szkoły Informatyki i Zarządzania i jest to jedna z najbardziej zinternacjonalizowanych uczelni w Polsce. Gros tych studentów stanowią właśnie studenci z naszej wschodniej granicy, z Ukrainy. Tak naprawdę od dobrych kilku lat Unia Europejska funkcjonuje od gaszenia jednego pożaru do gaszenia kolejnego pożaru. I pierwsze pytanie, które chcielibyśmy tutaj zadać w wersji wideo, to będzie pytanie zadane przez studenta Mikołaja z Ukrainy. Dlatego proszę o wyemitowanie wideo numer 1.
Dzisiaj Ukraina ma podpisaną umowę stowarzyszeniową z Unią Europejską. Od kilku dni obowiązuje ruch bezwizowy. Co Ukraina, a w szczególności młodzi Ukraińcy, mogą zrobić, aby integracja z Unią Europejską stała się możliwa?
Well, no. First, I'm glad that our Ukrainian colleague does start by mentioning the significant changes, conditions which in conditions which have emerged over the past few years, because the relations between the European Union and Ukraine in legal terms have changed very dramatically since the entry into force of this very comprehensive association agreement, as it is called, because it goes beyond just free trade and setting up a free trade area with Ukraine. And the best sign that this was a real game changer was, if you remember, the systematic and very hard objection of Russia to this agreement, because they indeed saw this as a framework which would bind Ukraine very closely to the European Union. And one also very notable element is indeed the recent lifting of visa obligations for Ukrainian citizens, which I'm sure Poland has witnessed much more than the other in terms of real consequences. I think our colleague there was talking about, what's in it for young people, or what can we do to indeed build on this closer relationship. I think when it comes to citizens themselves, we are already extremely open, and we have different dimensions of EU programs which are open to Ukrainian citizens. We certainly extend some support, for instance, for students' mobility, which extends also to students coming from Ukraine. When it comes to our research framework program called Horizon 2020, there again, we have some associated countries, and I think Ukraine is by now associated as well to that. And then the most fundamental, I would say, and something which should decisively shape indeed the dynamics of the relationship, is this association agreement, which will only produce effects progressively over time. But this is the basic requirement for, I think, a very far-reaching integration of the Ukrainian economy, in fact, to the single market. And there, of course, it goes about private actors, but we are in a fast-changing world when it comes to the economy itself, and it's all about new entrepreneurs and startups, etc. And so I think this is an enabling framework for younger Ukrainian generations to try and seize the opportunities which flow from there.
Thank you. Czy ktoś z Państwa odważy się zadać pytanie naszemu gościowi? Jest, ja już widzę podniesioną rękę. Proszę zaczekać. I tak jak moje doświadczenie akademickie mówi, że osoby bardzo często przed zadaniem pytania przygotowują grunt, robią wprowadzenie, ale bardzo bym prosiła osoby zadające pytanie, aby skrócić maksymalnie zadanie pytania właśnie do pytania. Będę bardzo wdzięczna.
Teresa Pamuła, Agencja Restrukturyzacji i Modernizacji Rolnictwa. Może nie będę mówić o rolnictwie, bo te sprawy są mi bardzo, bardzo znane i są bardzo ważne tutaj dla nas, dla Podkarpacia, ale nawiążę do słów pana komisarza, który mówił o wprowadzeniu euro. Dlaczego my boimy się euro? Słowacy przyjeżdżają do nas po produkty, Litwini przyjeżdżają do nas po produkty, sprzedajemy naszą żywność o wiele taniej. Moja mama ma emerytury 250 euro. Czy można będzie za 250 euro w tym momencie wyżyć przez miesiąc? Nie wiem. I to są te obawy. Drugie takie pytanie. Czy my, oczywiście wiem, że bardzo dużo Unia zrobiła dla pokoju, dla wszystkich państw, nie ma o czym dyskutować, ale jakie mamy podstawy, w którym kierunku pójdziemy? Czy Unia państw, czy Zjednoczone Stany Europy? I jakie mamy podstawy? Czy jednak chrześcijaństwo, które mamy te 1000 lat i na tej bazie budowaliśmy, nie będzie brane pod uwagę w budowaniu Unii?
When it comes to the euro, I would question also where the fears come from. The fears of the citizens. I'm not talking about the fears of the government. No one will ever be forced to adopt the euro, right? You mentioned Lithuania, you mentioned Slovakia. These two member states decided democratically to join the euro. I don't think pension levels are higher in Lithuania than in Poland. Lithuania and Slovakia today seem to be happy in the euro area. They decided to join, They seem to be indeed taking advantage of price differences, etc., with their euros in their pockets, which is fine. But Poland has its own choice to make. And Brussels will not dictate to Poland, you know, you need to join the euro. Sweden is not in the euro. Sweden doesn't have an opt-out to the euro. Legally speaking, Sweden is meant to join the euro one day. Sweden had a referendum some 10, 12 years ago, I don't remember, 2002, 2003. The Swedish population decided by 52% or so, no, we stay out. They are out. And they can change their minds somewhere in the future. So I don't understand if the debate in Poland is about, Brussels is trying to impose on us the euro. I don't understand the rationale for such an argument. This is not the truth. The truth is that it is and it will be Poland's choice whether Poland wants to join the euro or not. My point was on multi-speed Europe that it is very difficult for a member state like Poland, for any member state outside of the eurozone, to basically make life impossible for member states in the eurozone. Member states in the eurozone need to be allowed to develop the mechanisms which are necessary for the eurozone to function well. That is normal. Your second question was related to, or comment was related to, what is the cause, what is the direction in the future, and also what underlying values would steer that direction. This is what, very modestly, we are all here for today, no? I don't have the answer. It will be ultimately for the member states, all 27 together, to decide what they want to do in the future. It's good, perhaps, to remind ourselves how the European Union is constructed. It is not a gift from God. It is a decision, democratic decision, by states, by individual states, to put certain things together, to share certain parts of their sovereignty, but by their own free will. No one was ever forced to join the European Union. And as we saw, anyone is allowed to leave the European Union if they don't want to stay. When we decide, all the member states together, to endow the Union with certain collective powers, basically, we do that by unanimity. A majority of member states cannot decide for everyone to say, in the future we will have a European army for all. This cannot be decided without everyone agreeing to it, and every national parliament ratifying these changes of European treaties to produce that. But what is just as fundamental in what I said is that we are a construction based on law. And that is what has changed, in fact, the history of Europe. And I would hope that it has changed it for good, that there is no way back, that we will always, in the future, in Europe, build the future not on the basis of relations of strength, but based on the free will, democratically expressed, and the rule of law. The EU is a construction of law. It has a Court of Justice which says whether what we are doing is in conformity with those treaties which have been decided by all the member states. And this is why no one should be surprised that the European Commission, which according to the treaties is in fact the referee and the one institution which has to say whether member states are respecting the treaty, are respecting the law. It is the Commission's responsibility, in fact, obligation, to indicate where it believes that some member states are not following European law. And mostly, you know, it's not about constitutional tribunals anywhere. Mostly it's about member states respecting individual directives, so, you know, detailed legal texts which have been agreed at European level, and then bringing those member states in front of the Court of Justice if they don't agree that they need to change their internal legislation on that. So it's not about force. It is all about a rules-based system. And the rules-based system today says a few things about the fundamental values of the EU. So the treaties themselves, they say a few things about that. And it is about fundamental rights, yes. It is about the rule of law. It is about individual freedom. It is about social market economies and so on and so forth. And there is a charter of fundamental rights which goes into details and which is very far-reaching. And there is nothing in there, certainly, I think, because you were talking about Christian values, right? There is nothing in there against any religion. All to the contrary, it's about, of course, freedom of faith and freedom of religion. So this is what I would answer to you, and I would also claim, generally speaking, that the European Union has never been about forcing a change of identity on anyone. It is about adding a dimension. It is not about asking anyone, at least this is my personal, very deep experience. It is not about asking anyone to forget where they come from, what their fundamental identity is, what national feelings they have, etc., etc. Not at all. It is about, again, putting certain things together and adding rather than subtracting to the identity of each and everyone. And I think it's, you know, it's what I hope most Europeans have discovered over time with European integration, that in fact it doesn't force them into choices, not at all. They can remain perfectly who they are, and they have the opportunity of also feeling a bit European, perhaps, in the course of that evolution.
Jeszcze tutaj było pytanie wcześniej, pani podnosiła rękę, także pozwolę sobie przyjąć jeszcze jedno pytanie w tej części od publiczności i potem przejdziemy płynnie do drugiego etapu. Tutaj zapraszam.
Po polsku czy po angielsku?
Pani decyzja.
No, po polsku, okej. Anna Popławska, Katedra Filologii w SIS. Kilka tygodni temu, przy okazji rozpoczęcia negocjacji z Wielką Brytanią o wystąpieniu z Unii Europejskiej, akurat pani Danuta Hübner zwróciła uwagę na naszym rynku jako coś nowego, że angielski przestanie być już językiem urzędowym Unii Europejskiej. Patrząc na Unię Europejską z zewnętrznej perspektywy, chciałabym zapytać, czy jak liczymy koszty, oczywiście ile będzie kosztowało Wielką Brytanię wyjście finansowo, prawda, bo to usuną się instytucje z Londynu i tak dalej, ile będzie kosztowało Unię Europejską w sensie jej pozycji światowej, wyjście Wielkiej Brytanii z Unii Europejskiej? W zasadzie to jest to pytanie.
Yeah, thank you. On the language, the language is recognized at EU level, and that shows again, you know, the democracy of it, are all the languages which are official languages in each and every member state. English will remain an official language of some member states. Oh yes. English is an official language in Ireland. English is an official language in Malta, and English, I think, is also an official language in Cyprus. So English will not disappear as an official language. So on this, I have to speak out a different opinion from my previous boss, if I understand correctly. Okay. On the much more important question, and I can assure you, you know, the business language in the institutions will, of course, remain English, because this is the language which always a huge majority of colleagues master, while it is not the case for German or for French, etc. So, you know, very pragmatically, we don't work with interpreters normally in our daily business, so English will remain the language of communication within the institutions. But it will also remain an official language, meaning that all official texts will have their English version, just like they have their Polish version or their Lithuanian version, etc. Now, the cost of ultimately the UK exiting. I have to express a personal opinion. You know, it's not scientific at this point in time. I think that if the UK and the EU 27 don't manage to keep as many ties as possible from this present situation of deep integration, of course, into a new relationship. So if that new relationship is not still quite close to the present one, I am personally convinced that the costs will be very significant. To the UK, first and foremost, of course, because you know, the UK is only 12–13% of the EU population overall. So, you know, usually it's the smaller one who suffers more. But then also for the EU, it will be disruptive, of course. If you think at all the economic links which exist, the value chains, yeah, it's all about specialization today, and so you are not. If you look at one particular member state, even Germany is dependent on the UK for certain elements of its automotive industry, for instance. And so tomorrow it might be disrupted if we don't have a new relationship which at least keeps the essentials of a free trade area and the free flow of goods. And I think that is the most worrying dimension altogether. It is these economic costs linked to raising barriers to the free flow of people, of goods, of services, and possibly of capital even. A second dimension is the EU budget. The UK is a very significant contributor to the EU budget. And there, its contribution is not at all negligible, because it represents, around 1/6, 1/7 of the EU's GDP overall. And it has paid in to the EU budget much more than it has taken out. So it is clear that the rest of the EU in the future will feel poorer when it comes to the capacity to have redistribution through the EU budget between the member states, because a big contributor to the EU budget will have disappeared. And one specific worry is about the terms of the UK disengaging from the EU budget. Because the UK will be, until the last day, probably 29th March 2019, will be a member of the European Union with all rights and all obligations. And during all those years preceding 2019, the UK will have participated in budgetary decisions, making commitments in the name of the EU. We today live under a budgetary framework which runs from 2014 to 2020. Well, the decisions were made in 2013, in fact. And they run until 2020 and beyond when it comes to really paying out. This is essential for cohesion policy, for instance. These are 7-year programs, 7-year investment programs, and they take time. You don't build a motorway in one day. You need a lot of time to build it. And then only the EU progressively reimburses partially the costs. And if the UK, the day after it leaves in 2019, says, I have nothing to do anymore with the EU budget, this will pose a huge problem. And this is why the negotiating position, and it's a position of principle as well, of the rest of the EU, is to say, sorry, dear friend UK, you signed all of these commitments. So now you have to continue to pay your share of those past commitments. And this is what you can see in the press, you know, what makes the big titles, like the UK is asked to pay a divorce bill, as it is called, of 60 billion euros or 100 billion euros even. These figures are very close to reality, you know, of what we will be asking from the UK. But there should be no misunderstanding. This is all about past commitments. It is not about trying to punish the UK. It is about keeping the European budget, in fact, in equilibrium by not having to ask all the others to compensate for the UK's sudden refusal to contribute. So it's quite a strategic question. And this also indicates that these negotiations will not be nice. They will not be pleasant. They will be bloody, to use a vulgar English term. And personally, I'm very much afraid of them, because they will show, I think, also what kind of negative forces unfold once you enter a logic of going separate ways, of disintegrating. It's exactly the same as, you know, a private divorce. Yeah? It's usually not beautiful, but here the relationship as it has been constructed through European integration is so close that it will be extremely difficult to untangle, therefore the risk is high, not only that the EU's working overall will be very disrupted over the 2 years of negotiations, because institutions will do nothing else than negotiate with the UK instead of thinking about, you know, the future and how to move on, etc. So this is one big risk. But secondly, because it will be so complicated, one should not underestimate the possibility that it ends very badly without a deal. And there, law will strike. And it will be, well, from one day to the next, the UK is like, I don't know. It's difficult even to name a country in the world, because with most countries in the world, the EU has a relationship, yeah, has a legal relationship. So I was going to tell you Zimbabwe, but even Zimbabwe, you know, has a relationship, a legal relationship with the EU. So, but the UK will fall basically into the category of the last third country in the world, yeah, like WTO rules, World Trade Organization rules. And this is, well, very frightening, I think, because indeed, if such is the situation, and it's called, you know, it's called the hard Brexit scenario, that you have this hard divorce and you fall into legal no man's land, there the economic costs would be very, very high. This is my belief. Nothing to smile about, unfortunately.
Dziękuję za to pytanie, dlatego że pytanie dotyczące funduszy, a właściwie Brexitu było jedną z pytań, które zostało nam zadane przez Facebooka. Zadał je pan Marian ze Stalowej Woli. Szanowni Państwo, ja miałam przyjemność dzisiaj spotkać naszego gościa w Centrum Wystawienniczo-Kongresowym w Jasionce i uprzedziłam go, że nie wszystkie pytania będą dotyczyć jego portfolio, natomiast gwoli wypełnienia zobowiązań organizatorskich pozwolą Państwo, że padnie teraz pytanie dotyczące naszego drugiego modułu, polityki spójności po roku 2020 i po tym pytaniu oddam Państwu głos, bo widzę już, że są osoby chętne, które chciałyby zadać pytanie. Dlatego poproszę teraz o wyemitowanie wideo numer 3.
Czy w kolejnych ramach finansowych planuje się nowe podejście strategiczne do środków na finansowanie badań i działalności innowacyjnej?
Well, first, I think it is pretty much beyond doubt that Europe will continue to try to promote research because we are at levels of public and private research which we consider collectively as not sufficient today. We have this goal of reaching 3% of GDP of annual expenditure in research and innovation when you take the public expenditure and the private expenditure together. In the vast majority of member states, we are very far from there, and the EU average is also still quite far from it. We're at slightly above 2%, I believe. Now, we have a European research program, which is a centrally managed program, which represents more or less 10% of the overall public expenditure in research. So 90% is done by the member states and by regions, etc., in terms of public support to research, and 10% is done by this Horizon 2020 program. And then you have, of course, in cohesion policy, a lot of expenditure under cohesion policy which goes to research and innovation. If my memory serves me well, we are not far away from 20% of what is spent, and Poland has embraced this this progressive change, and now the government has, in fact, as you certainly know better than me, adopted a new, how is it called, responsible development program, is it that? Yeah. Which also puts a lot of focus on research and innovation and slightly less, on basic infrastructure, etc. So this progressive move away, to put it very simply, from motorways to research and innovation in cohesion policy should certainly continue. And I think one should not either expect a big shift away in types of financing, i.e. we would remain with a dominance of grants in the research and innovation area, because it is a lot about taking risks and not knowing exactly what the outcome might be. So instruments based on loans, where you have to pay back the money eventually, are not really the right ones in most cases for research and innovation. So this relatively recent emphasis put on financing European projects by loans rather than by grants, I think will not extend very significantly to research and innovation.
Thank you. Muszę po europejsku zadbać o kwoty płciowe, dlatego pozwolę sobie oddać głos teraz panu, tutaj pan w białej koszuli. Także proszę zaczekać na mikrofon.
Good afternoon. My name is Martin Siegwald. I'm running a consulting company here in Rzeszów, which is supporting small and medium-sized enterprises to apply for European funds. And I wanted to ask you two questions. First, yes, I'm of German originality, and I'm here in Rzeszów for 10 years. And I wanted to ask you, how do you see the future of the EU regional policy after 2020? I mean, you said already some points. And the other question, do you think the Polish strict objection to take refugees will affect the allocation of structural funds for Poland?
To pytanie musiało paść. That was the question that must be asked.
Okay. And so it must be answered. No, I'm happy that you asked the question. Because I sometimes have the impression that there is not enough recognition of the miracle which the EU budget is. And why do I say that the EU budget is a miracle, if you think about it very fundamentally? Because the EU budget organizes massive transfers of money between member states. You know? Poland is one main beneficiary. If you look at it in terms of national income, GDP, countries like Hungary, Lithuania, Estonia have in the past few years received in net terms, so when you discount their contribution to the EU budget, sometimes more, on an annual basis, more than 5% of their GDP. And why do I say this is a miracle? Because this is the result of a decision which was made unanimously by the member state, just like changing treaties. You know, the financial frameworks for the annual budgets is decided by unanimity. Everyone has to agree. Everyone has to agree how much they will pay in and how much they will get out. And don't misunderstand me. You know, to me, the EU budget is not mainly about how much you pay in and how much you get out. It's not about accounting. But of course, national finance ministries look at it from that angle, from that very reduced angle. You find no alliance or group of sovereign nations in the world where you have even close to that level of solidarity between the member states, of financial solidarity between the member states. Look at what happens at UN level, where you also have these rules that, you know, everyone has to agree. Well, the UN doesn't even have enough money to refurbish its headquarters. Yeah? This is what happens when normally when you have a group of countries who all can say, no, I don't want to contribute. Well, usually you fall then on the lowest common denominator. The EU budget is not the lowest common denominator. Clearly not. Clearly not. And this is why I say it is a bit of a miracle. But we also have to recognize what makes this miracle possible. When do you have solidarity between people? When do you have solidarity between states, like it is the case here? When they feel it is worth it, when they feel they have something in common, when they feel they have a common purpose, a common future. And I mention this because it is related exactly to your question. I don't think we can blame member states who suddenly ask that kind of question. Like, you know, I'm doing my share of effort when it comes to what is called the migration crisis, but it's a crisis about asylum policy. And it's a very delicate question for Europe indeed, because Europe has for a long time lived, I would say, in a comfortable situation that it could be very noble about its generosity and its values in welcoming anyone whose life would be threatened, coming from outside and granting him an asylum status. That's the Geneva Convention of 1949, 50, 51, a long time ago. Very noble cause. Now, what makes, of course, the situation a bit complicated today to live up to these noble principles, but we are all member states are part of the Geneva Convention, yes? So have obligations from that point of view to examine any asylum claim objectively and to see whether indeed the person which is asking for protection is threatened, and whether it is possible or not to send that person simply back. What makes it particularly difficult today, I think, is two things. The first one is that the flow of people we are seeing is not only massive, but it is also of a less clear nature. We have a lot of economic migrants, we know it, which are coming from Africa mostly. And so you have these flows coming from Africa at the same time as you have the flows coming due to the war in Syria. And so how do you make the difference, yeah, between the economic migrants and the people really fleeing war? And then you have a second dimension which is emphasized a lot, in fact, by your government at this point in time. It is considerations of threats which individuals could pose. And this linked very much with the new terrorism which has arisen through the support of Islamic State and so on and so forth. So it makes it very complicated, but I think it is beyond doubt that there are people who are fleeing life-threatening risks today and who are knocking at the door of Europe. And the question is, what is our responsibility as Europe? We have a common asylum policy, you know, again, decided by all together. In theory, we follow the same criteria to assess an individual asylum application and to grant or not grant asylum. So legally speaking, we are not allowed as Europeans to simply say, we don't want any Syrians, we don't want any Afghans. Because objectively speaking, among the Syrians there will be, certainly some people deserve asylum. So some member states, Germany in particular, yes, has suddenly decided we will open the door. And it was to resolve a European crisis, in fact. So, you know, I must say, I find it impressive, the decision which Ms. Merkel took back in 2015 to say, we will open the doors. And this solved the problem in Hungary, this solved the problem in Austria, etc., because everyone could move on to Germany, disregarding for once these common European rules, where in theory it was for Hungary to look at asylum applications, not for Germany. So a great act, I think, of, again, solidarity with other member states. And so that these member states might then be asking, yes, but is there a level playing field when talking about solidarity, you know? Do I, Germany, have to show solidarity, the same level of solidarity, through my financial contribution to the well-being of other member states, to the economic development of other member states, if on another question which needs to be resolved together, basically there is a total unwillingness of others. I'm not saying this is the case of Poland, yeah, that there would be total unwillingness to contribute in one way or another to helping out on the refugees question. But I think it is unavoidable that such questions indeed would arise. Like, is there quid pro quo? Do you show solidarity as much as you should so that I am willing to continue to show financial solidarity with you. And I would add to that, it's not only about that question. I think it's only, we will be seeing that. It's also about the question of our common values. Again, you know, if you are in a family and you are close-knit, etc., you share so many things. Well, solidarity is natural, and it's nearly boundless. But if you start doubting whether you are sharing the same fundamental values, you might not be as willing to share and to make an effort for the other. So I think no one should be in doubt that this question will also come if we speak about budgetary questions in 1 or 2 years' time, and there is a lack of mutual understanding on questions of fundamental values and the rule of law.
Dziękuję bardzo. I last but not least, pytania dotyczące środków przeznaczonych na rozwój regionów najsłabiej rozwiniętych albo słabo rozwiniętych w Unii Europejskiej. Jeśli mogłabym mieć prośbę, żeby odpowiedź na pytanie była krótka, tak abyśmy mogli przyjąć jeszcze jedno pytanie tutaj z publiczności. Ja poproszę o wyemitowanie wideo numer 4.
Podkarpacie jest jednym z 4 najbiedniejszych regionów Polski i również znajduje się w 10 najbiedniejszych regionów Unii Europejskiej. Mimo że spora ilość funduszy w ramach polityki regionalnej jest przeznaczonych właśnie dla tego regionu, on się bardzo dobrze rozwija, to nadal poziom konwergencji, poziom rozwoju wobec tych regionów Polski bardziej rozwiniętych się nie zmniejsza. Dystans praktycznie pozostaje taki sam, ponieważ zarówno te regiony bogatsze, jak i Podkarpacie jest regionem, które zwiększają swój rozwój. Moje pytanie jest takie, czy po 2020 roku, jak będziemy mieli nowe fundusze unijne, zostanie utrzymany po pierwsze program Polska Wschodnia, który był dedykowany tym właśnie najbiedniejszym regionom z tej części kraju, z Polski Wschodniej, oraz w jaki sposób doprowadzić do tego, aby te regiony najbiedniejsze w UE w szybszym tempie doganiały regiony dobrze rozwinięte, tak naprawdę też regiony również na poziomie średnim, jeżeli chodzi o całość terenu Polski czy Unii Europejskiej. Dziękuję.
Well, that's very much related to the extremely interesting conference with colleagues we attended this morning, in fact. On the concrete question, will there be a special program, special support also in the future for the poorer Polish regions? I have no idea. What I do expect is that in one form or another there will continue to be a cohesion policy. And I would hope that indeed it has means in the future which are comparable to the means today. But we have spoken about, you know, some threats to the possible level. So it might be threats because member states are unhappy with each other, or it might be threats linked to Brexit, because again, Brexit will lead to a poorer feeling European Union. But what I do expect is that in any event, cohesion policy will remain a policy which provides much more intensive support to poorer regions than to more developed regions, just as has been the case until now. The specificity here, and in fact I was the one to invent it when I was in national diplomacy, because Luxembourg had the presidency when the negotiations were going on the previous financial framework, 2007-13. And there, in fact, I was in charge of that for the presidency, and I was the one to invent the special program for the 5 eastern regions. So I know how it emerged. But this, to me, is not fundamental. What is fundamental is the other question which was asked. And it is, in fact, are we satisfied with the progress made by regions like Podkarpackie after more or less 10 years of very intensive economic support through EU funds? And especially comparing the development of the region indeed with the rest of Poland. One can perhaps be slightly disappointed, yes, that in fact the region has, even though, you know, and here especially I understand the city is incredibly dynamic, has a demographic development which is rare for Poland, with an increase in population of more than 20% in less than 10 years, I think. But overall, if you look at the indicators, the fundamental economic indicators, there is convergence, yes, with towards the EU average, but there is no reduction of the gap with the average of Poland, and productivity levels are not really increasing at a fully satisfactory rate. So our conclusion was that clearly it's not just about the money, and we need to look at what else we should do to try and unleash all the potential of the region, to try and evacuate some obstacles to growth and economic development. And this is the purpose of the so-called Lagging Regions Initiative, which was launched around 1 year ago, and for which Podkarpackie, together with one other Polish region, is a pilot project. And after 1 year, we are extremely pleased because we have identified in a collective way, with the help of the World Bank, but together with the Marshal's office, well, the regional authorities, but also the private sector, the research sector, the academic sector, etc. We have identified certain elements quite crucial to work on and to try and indeed improve the framework conditions for this financial support to produce better results all together. So I think for the future, in fact, we should not just be obsessed with money. I know for Poland, the present financial framework produced a nicely round figure of overall support, but we should also recognize it is not only about that. There are many other things which can and should be looked at in terms of administrative capacity, all types of regulations linked to the ease or unease of doing business, of being innovative, etc., so that we really achieve what is, you know, and I will always plead for that, what is absolutely fundamental for the survival of the Union as such and for the survival of the Eurozone. This notion of convergence, you know, that basically things are growing together, and no one in the EU is somehow left behind and forgotten, etc. In the EU and in the Eurozone. I mean, think about Greece now, about Portugal, about Spain having gone through very, very deep recessions. That notion is crucial for the future as well, and all the more crucial because we see that there are fundamental economic trends and forces which all go towards concentrating economic activity. It's linked to globalization, it's linked to technological change. You have huge advantages of agglomerations, and you see this in the UK. Yeah? The Brexit vote was also undoubtedly a vote about the unease of so many people who were not the people of London, but who were feeling somehow without economic future altogether. And this is not the, this is not the European Union is not the cause for that. Or if you look at the vote in the latest U.S. election, you see exactly the same. It was not the big powerhouses of America, the big megacities which voted for President Trump. It was all these midtown, etc., areas which felt Rust Belt and so on, which felt very uneasy about the pace of change and about whether they had the means to reinvent themselves in this very fast changing world. So the notion of convergence to me is essential to the solidity of European integration overall and of the euro area.
Dziękuję, thank you. A szanowni Państwo, z obydwu stron, zarówno z prawej, jak i z lewej, dostaję sygnały, że będziemy powoli kończyć. Ja ze swojej strony przypominam tylko o tym, aby Państwo oddali słuchawki, więc jeśli widzą Państwo tam osoby, które do Państwa machają z tyłu, Monika, Dominik, proszę pamiętać o słuchawkach. Ja natomiast ze swojej strony mogę oczywiście zaoferować tutaj, o których mówiliśmy na samym początku, także one tam leżą, one tam jeszcze są, więc proszę je śmiało zabierać. Jeśli będą Państwo jeszcze wrzucać cokolwiek dotyczące tego wydarzenia do mediów społecznościowych, bardzo proszę pamiętać o naszym hashtagu, a ja już teraz zaproszę bardzo szybko szkoły, które miały obiecane zdjęcie razem z panem dyrektorem, a pozostałym Państwu bardzo serdecznie dziękuję. Panie i Panowie, Marciem Lemaitrem. Thank you.
My other 2 words or 3 words of Polish. Dziękuję bardzo.